My name is Maria Zhang, and I'm a senior at Rutgers University. I'm an English major, creative writing minor, and a women's leadership scholar at the Institute for Women's Leadership. On behalf of the Gloria Steinem Endowed Chair in Media, Culture, and Feminist Studies, I'd like to welcome everybody to this very exciting conversation on easy beauty. The Gloria Steinem Chair is an innovative collaboration among the Rutgers Institute for Women's Leadership, the School of Communication and Information, and the Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at the School of Arts and Sciences. The Gloria Steinem Chair honors and draws to campus eminent scholars and practitioners to immerse the university community in debate and scholarship about new media, social change, and power structures. Our current Gloria Steinem Chair is Dr. Roxane Gay. Roxane Gay is a woman of many titles, a writer, editor, social commentator, and professor. Alongside numerous publications in the New York Times Magazine, she is the author of bestsellers Hunger, Bad Feminist, and Difficult Women. She has her own newsletter, The Audacity, as well as a podcast, The Roxane Gay Agenda. I have had the privilege of being one of her students in her creative writing workshops, and her insightful teachings, both on writing and on life, have made a great impact on all her students. Her unapologetic and humble spirit have touched all of us at Rutgers and beyond. Dr. Gay will be in conversation with Dr. Chloé Cooper Jones. Chloé Cooper Jones is a contributing writer at the New York Times Magazine and is a Pulitzer Prize finalist for her article, Fearing for His Life. She is also the recipient of the 2020 Whitting Creative Nonfiction Grant and the Howard Foundation Grant, both of which have supported the creation of her memoir, Easy Beauty. I found a very meaningful quote from Dr. Cooper Jones in her interview with People magazine, where she says that people's fear of experiencing disability, quote, can turn into a rejection or even a disgust at the concept of disability. She says that this fear is something worth looking at and maybe having a healthier relationship to, not just because I hope that that means you'll treat me differently, but because you might be able to have a capacity of grace for yourself when inevitably you have situations when your mental and physical body shift. This book is a stunning exploration of human discomfort and understanding how to face it. Copies of the book will be available outside after the event. Now, please join me in giving a big thank you to Dr. Roxane Gay and Dr. Chloé Cooper Jones for a reading and conversation on easy beauty. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Maria is an incredible young woman and an absolute delight in the classroom. And so it was a real pleasure to be introduced by her. And thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us here at Rutgers this evening. And thank you, all of you, for joining us on this really gorgeous, finally, spring day. Yeah. It's been a long winter. Chloe, Easy Beauty is, as Maria said, a stunning memoir. And I loved it on a sentence level. I loved it conceptually. I loved just all of it. And I think it would be wonderful if you would read a little bit from it before we talk about your book and more.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Can you
Awesome.
all hear me? Okay, I'm going to stand just to read because that feels like I can project. Thank you, Maria, for that perfect introduction. I'm so honored by the time and effort that you put into being here, and thank you to Dr. Gay for inviting me. It's an honor. And thank you all for being here instead of skateboarding outside, which you can do later. That's fine. Okay. So I'm just going to read from actually the end of my book. And the only thing you really need to know is that this book is in many ways a quest in which I am trying to change something about myself. And in order to do that, I leave home. I leave my family in Brooklyn and travel the world by myself just in hopes of seeking experiences that will create the shift in me. And the book ends with me back in Brooklyn with my family, with my husband and son who are over here, Andrew, my husband, and Wolfgang, my son, trying to see if I can be home and sort of integrate these lessons that I've learned in order to be a little bit more present in my life. So this is the end of the book, back in Brooklyn. Wolfgang and I stand below a sulking sky. He's done with school for the day, but wants to stay on the playground with his friends for a while before I haul him off to the bodega and then home. I let him have 10 more minutes and watch him hurl his body around a jungle gym. He plays easily and happily with other children. Clouds form above. They make shapes upon which I can force a category: pig, shoe, hat. But the categories don't stick. Shapes dissolve. Reality remains in restless motion. It was beautiful. It was beauty. This engagement, this grasp and release, this brief but real discerning of the fleeting and how it redirects my focus from myself and toward the world. We get our groceries. Wolfgang clutches a frozen pizza to his chest on our walk home. What shapes do you see in the clouds, I ask. Just a bunch of Pikachus, says Wolfgang. After dinner, the three of us go on a walk. Everyone knows us. The ladies at the pharmacy give Wolfgang a sucker. We get a bottle of water from the bodega, and Wolfgang sits on the ground petting the familiar cats. Nail salon, Chinese takeout counter, laundromat. At the edge of Prospect Park, we see a sign for a magic show. We should go, Andrew says. I don't know, says Wolfgang. What, you aren't curious? Curious about what? Wolfgang shrugs. Someone doing tricks and pretending it's magic? But maybe this time it will be magic, says Andrew. Maybe it'll be the best thing we've ever seen. Wolfgang reluctantly agrees, and we walk to a field where many young children, close to his age, sit in the grass in a circle around the great Moody Trudy. I recognize a few of Wolfgang's friends from school, and I tell him to go sit with these kids, but he refuses, and he stands in the back at the edge of the crowd next to me. The great Moody Trudy waves her hands over a fishbowl, drapes a cloth over it, says a few magic words, removes the cloth, and reveals a fish swimming there. The kids clap and cheer, but Wolfgang is unimpressed. The fish was in the base of the bowl the whole time, he says. The great Moody Trudy starts another trick involving a newspaper. She pours clean water onto it, but then she wrings it out and the water is green. The newspaper ink was food coloring, says Wolfgang. The great Moody Trudy balls up the newspaper, then launches into an impassioned speech about the environment and the importance of not littering. She leads her crowd with her hand cupped behind her ear. Let's hear it, kids, she says. This newspaper should not be left in the grass of this nice park. It should be put in the... And all the children shout, trash! And Wolfgang covers his face in disbelief and whispers, recycling, these idiots! The great Moody Trudy pours lemonade into a cup, starts a sip, then pretends to trip, and out comes glitter everywhere. There was never lemonade in that cup, says Wolfgang. She does a trick while juggling balls. One disappears. I saw her palm it, says Wolfgang. Tell her, Wolfgang, I say. Tell her you're not fooled. Andrew glares at me. I know how you're doing this trick, says Wolfgang, loud enough for everyone to hear. I pull Wolfgang close to me. He reaches up to hold my hand. We are united, safe, apart, against the scene, but together. The final trick involves a stuffed rabbit going on a journey. The rabbit, we're told, goes into the forest of happiness and emerges with a key to a secret box that will unlock the real rabbit. The great Moody Trudy lifts the box and puts it on the pedestal. She pulls a drawer open to show it was empty. The drawer has a false back, says Wolfgang. Where is he? Where is the real rabbit? Is he in the drawer? Asks the great Moody Trudy. No, all the kids shout back. Yes, he clearly is, says Wolfgang. Tell her she's busted, I say, nudging Wolfgang, and we both crack up. Tell her you've got her all figured out. Andrew grimaces. "Stop that," he says to me. "Promise me," says the great moody Trudy. "Promise, fingers in the air, everyone. Promise me you won't tell anyone if I reveal to you the secrets of my trick." "I don't owe you that," says Wolfgang, and we high five. "Chloe," Andrew says, "don't. He's smart. Look how smart he is," I say to my husband. "He's figured out all the tricks." "Okay," says the great moody Trudy, "time to meet the rabbit." And she knocks on the false backing of the drawer, and Wolfgang smirks and begins to say, "See, I told you." But then the backing collapses, and the whole box collapses, and there's no rabbit there at all, and Wolfgang stops and stares. The great moody Trudy holds up a stuffed rabbit and says, "I guess there was no real rabbit after all." And Wolfgang's face falls. The great moody Trudy starts to put the stuffed rabbit back in her jacket, and then with a flourish, she takes off the jacket, swings it in the air like a cape, swishing it between us and the stuffed rabbit, and when she pulls it back, a real one sits sweetly in her hands. The crowd erupts. Wolfgang, too. He's enthralled. He's seen something magical. "How did she? I can't. Where is it?" Wolfgang says, beaming. "See, not so smart now, you cynical little jerks," says Andrew. The great moody Trudy waves the children forward, offering to let them pet the rabbit. And to my surprise, Wolfgang darts forward to join the line, and without a trace of self-consciousness, stares up with a face full of wonder at the great moody Trudy, and he tells her she is the greatest magician he's ever seen. And he pets the rabbit gently, then nuzzles it with his nose, and the great moody Trudy leans down, and they embrace. We stand at the edge of the park and watch Wolfgang play with the other kids. Andrew asks me, "When Wolfgang was standing in the back of the crowd with us at the magic show, do you know what I thought?" "What?" "I thought," Andrew continues, "I went to school dances, but I never danced." "Oh," I say, "neither did I." As kids, we'd both been compelled to derail experiences we felt excluded from. We'd believed and placed all of our self-worth on the notion that to assert yourself against the crowd was a form of higher-level thinking, which sometimes it is, and sometimes it was cowardice. We'd not been great at seeing the difference, but Andrew is better about this now, and I am learning. "I didn't participate," he says, "and it might have felt good to be united with my peers, but I missed the chance to find out." "Right," I say. "I look at Wolfgang," continues Andrew, "and I see someone who is smart and kind, and I want him to be critical, but not at the expense of camaraderie. His compassion and his intelligence are complex enough to allow for both if we just don't what? If we just don't get in his way." That's it.
Thank you so much for reading that excerpt.
Thank you.
I thought it was really charming the first time I read it, and it's even more charming now to hear it, because magic, sometimes you do think, I've seen it all, and then there's the one trick you really can't make sense of, and you realize magic is real after all. Your memoir's title, Easy Beauty, came from the philosopher Bernard Bassenket, but I'm curious about how your ideas of easy beauty changed over the course of the book. And do you think of that phrase differently on the other side of the book?
Yeah, absolutely I do. And I think the book in a lot of ways is about trying to figure out the right tension between what Bassenket differentiates between easy and difficult beauty. So he just says easy beauty is the kind of beauty that arrives to us instantaneously. So the kind of beauty that we would experience when we look at a sunset, or we smell a rose, or we hear a very simple song, or a simple spatial rhythm, that the second our ears perceive it, we are, dancing or moved by it. And I think the vast majority of life's pleasures are actually forms of easy beauty, immediate beauty, a wonderful meal, or the experience of, walking outside on this incredible day, this really easy beauty. And then he says there's this thing called difficult beauty, which is just beauty that is harder to recognize. It's not as apparent to us. Difficult beauty often encompasses complexity, tension, and this third term that he uses called width. And the thing about difficult beauty is he says, if you're willing to sit with something that is perhaps opaque at first, or its beauty isn't obvious to you, if you're willing to have patience with it, if you're willing to put in effort, or if you're willing to learn about it from a great mentor, then suddenly it also can be unlocked as very beautiful. And I'm sure we've all had this experience, looking at a painting that we don't understand, and then we understand the context of it, suddenly it's much richer, and we have this perceptual shift. Or listening to a really complex piece of music that sounds like noise, but then when we sit with it for a long time, we hear the subtleties, and suddenly, again, a perceptual shift that allows more beauty to enter our lives. And I really felt like difficult beauty was also a good way of thinking about how people saw me, that my body wasn't the kind of body that people could easily see the value of, that was my experience at least, or easily or immediately see beauty or desire or attractiveness. And so because of that, I formed a really intense attachment to difficult beauty, thinking anything that's worthwhile must be difficult, anything that's actually of value must be resistant to you must have to struggle with it. And I really devalued easy beauty. I saw it as a lesser form. But I think a lot of the struggle of the book is trying to recognize that you lose so much when you're defensive against the kind of beauty that comes to you quickly, or when you're just defensive in general about being open. So the kind of patience that I thought I had for difficult beauty, I didn't have for easy beauty. And so throughout the book, I'm sort of turning those ideas over and over and over in my mind and looking for beauty and sensing my own resistance, or what Aristotle says is the evidence of a weakness in a spectator. And I a lot of the book is about my own weakness as a spectator. Yeah.
One of the things that struck me throughout the book was the sort of casual ease with which many people articulated their feelings about difficult beauty as related to your body. Mm-hmm. And you seem to be able to remain composed in those moments. And I'm curious about that decision to not pop off every single time, honestly, because I just don't even know how you develop that level of self-control. Or is it that you're picking your battles?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I think, what you're referring to in the book is I do sort of detail certain moments in which people say sort of thoughtless, cruel things to me. And something my husband brings up all the time is like all the worst ones in our shared life that he's observed are not even in the book, because there were some that were so awful that I thought if I put this in the book, no one will believe it. One is, I'm just going to tell you guys this. I've actually never told this story before, but one of my first dates with my husband, we went into a thrift store. This is like, we just met, I'm really trying to impress him, or actually I was trying to move to New York and get rid of him, but then I was like, no, I'm wrong, I'm in love. But we were still really new to each other, and I was still trying to feel like, an attractive person worth his time. And we went into a thrift store, and this woman who I'd never met just ran over to me, grabbed me, and shoved my face into her stomach and held me. And she said, what did she say? She said, "Are you one of the little people from TV?" Right? That's what it was, yeah. Oh, and he was like, "How can you not put that in the book?" And I was like, "I don't know, we don't need to." But now I'll just tell all of you. So, I mean, stuff like that happens, it happens all the time. It's sort of part of my lived daily experience, whether it be people sort of covert stares, or people, I think, having sort of inappropriate physical relationships because I seem childlike to them. So there's a lot of like patting my head that happens, or like people leaning down and speaking in like a high-pitched voice, like I'm a puppy or something. But I think, like, to answer your question, though, I can't pop off all the time because anger is exhausting, and sometimes I just have to get my groceries, you know? Or sometimes I'm with my son and I'm trying to model something like what I would want him to do in the situation. Sometimes I feel so much shame that I just carry it all inside and then go home and feel sad, although a lot of the book is about this sort of arc of allowing myself to leave people's pain with them and not take it on. So I think that the other thing that's really important to me, and this is part of the journey of the book, is that every single one of us, myself included, and I really talk a lot about my own ability to do this, is we all live in a world in which we are encountering lots of strangers and we need to make really quick decisions about people. And so we're often identifying one quick visual thing and then we're reducing people down to that. That's not unique to disability, that's every single one of us. And we've all had experiences where someone's looked at you, chosen one visual thing to identify about you, and then spoken to you from that place. And I think it's really just part of having a complex brain that has to do really quick sorting. So it is part of being human. It's something all of us have felt and are equally capable of doing to others. It's a profoundly reductive impulse, and like the plea of my life is for people to not reduce me down in that way or dehumanize me in that way. And so I felt like if that was the thing I was going to ask of others, I had to figure out how to give that also to others. And so when people ask inappropriate questions or say things that are hurtful, I try to remember, like, they are whole people, they are complex people, they should not be reduced down to their worst moment or a moment of ignorance, because I don't want to be reduced down to that. I want people to forgive me. And then I look at my son and sending him off to school and how limited, you know, your child's perspective on the world is and how dependent you are on people's generosity to educate them and to help them be better agents of their communities. And I thought that was going to be my most sincere wish, my deepest ask of my community, so I had to be able to do that back. But I also just complain to my husband. I mean, like, there are times you feel really angry, but yeah, I try to limit it.
That's an interesting way of thinking about it, of not reducing people in the hopes that they too will not reduce you. One of the things that I also noticed throughout the book was that so much of it was about traveling, which I did not expect, like as a travelogue. And you wrote beautifully about traveling around the world and exploring and seeking. As you embarked on each of these trips, these journeys, did you have a sense of what you were looking for? Because so much of the prose showed that you were searching. And ultimately, what did you find in all of that journeying?
Well, there were a couple of things. One was, like, you know, growing up being a reader and then being, you know, studying philosophy, there's just all these stories of great travelers who get to solve big problems by going out to the top of a mountain or getting lost in the woods and thinking their big thoughts and then bringing them back to us. And we go like, oh, thank you for bringing them. But those people that I read, these brilliant travel writers, were all white men of means who didn't have children, or they did have children that who cares, they weren't taking care of them. So there weren't that many women that are in travel literature as a whole, and often women, if you do read travel writing by women, they're often having to justify really hard why they're doing it. So you'll find, like, a lot of the really famous travel writing by women is like, I got divorced, it's okay, I get to go, you know? Or like, somebody died, I get to go. Like, and they have to, but men never, they just go. Like, they don't have to have a reason. I
have to conquer.
They're like, they're like, why wouldn't I go to the mountain and think my big thoughts? So I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? I want to do that. And so there aren't that many women, there aren't that many mothers, and there aren't that many disabled, broke mothers. So I was like, I'll do it. I'll be the first. or an early person in that genre. So part of that's very intentional, like putting myself in a literary tradition that I was intruding on a little bit, that I wanted to see myself or bodies like mine be in. But then the other thing is that I'm explicitly testing this theory from Iris Murdoch. Iris Murdoch talks about beauty's power to do this thing she calls unselfing. So she thinks that beauty, the experience of aesthetic pleasure, whether it be in art, in nature, in music, with each other, that all of those experiences have the power and the possibility to move you outside of your own limited perspective and to give you the wideness of the world. And so when you move back into your own thoughts and feelings, you do so bringing a wider perspective of the world with you. So Iris Murdoch really thought that beauty was not just for pleasure and it wasn't for entertainment, but was actually literally an agent for change, that it could change our consciousness. When we change our consciousness, we change the way we see. When we change the way we see, we change the way we act. And all of those things could create a better self and a better community and a better world. And so this book is me really wanting to change something about myself and using Iris Murdoch's theory as a hypothesis. So I needed to go away from what felt like my fixed roles as wife and mother and professor. I needed to break free of those roles, be alone, go into the world, and seek beauty. So every single chapter of this book is I'm in a different city across the world, and I'm thinking about an art object, whether it be Bernini sculptures, a Verdi opera, a Beyonce concert, Roger Federer. Anybody like Roger Federer?
Hell yeah.
Beautiful, right? I mean, it was so fun. It was so great. I got to follow Roger Federer for a year. That was amazing. And then, to see if I would be changed by these experiences, specifically experiencing them in a world of others, in a crowd. Yeah.
You wrote in intimate detail about retreating to the neutral room of your mind to escape frustration, boredom, pain, really anything. And when it comes to writing, it can be really challenging to write about interiority in a way that's interesting, because oftentimes it's just like, why are you telling me this? That's your diary. And I was curious about how you thought about interiority as you were writing from a craft perspective, because it really did work and it didn't feel like, oh, this is too much of someone's interior mind. I was just intrigued about where do the walls of this memory palace go.
Yeah.
So I was curious about how you approached that.
Oh, I'm so glad that you feel that way. I mean, I think, so one thing was I was very careful about the structure of this book and what the sort of journey of it was. I find that a lot of the nonfiction or the memoir that I read is often written from the perspective of hindsight, and so the author gets to be deeply authoritative and say, here's how I became this great thing that I am, or whatever. And that's nice, but it didn't help me. I didn't know, I really have such an amazing admiration for Judith Heumann, who just passed very recently. She was, if you don't know who she was an incredibly important, probably the most important civil rights leader for Americans with disabilities. And her memoir, Being Human, I picked up that book looking for, maybe it's just selfishly, like a guide. Like, how do I move into a powerful or empowered state of my identity? And her book is like, I'm great and I did all these wonderful things and here I'll tell you about them. And it's a brilliant book. But I wanted to write a book that was always in the midst of struggle. So the book begins at my worst and it just moves through the struggle of trying to change, and it ends as I'm just beginning to get a tiny bit of a clue. There's no authoritative state. And so it was really important to me that the prose was located in the mind and the consciousness of somebody who was really had a strong desire to change something about themselves and discover something, but didn't know how to do it. So that it was important that certain things were recursive, that there was both on a sentence level and on a content level, that you're moving sort of back and forth the way that you do when you're having a hard time figuring out how to solve something. But it was also important that the writing was really embodied. So I wanted to bring people as close to the experience of what living in a body like mine actually feels like, both the really great things and the moments of pain, the moments of suffering, the moments in which I feel quite weak and incapable of doing certain things. So I wanted to keep all the language really sunk into that and not move back into a safe place in which I could recount, my experiences, if that makes sense.
It does. It's similar to a lot of what I was doing in Hunger,
Yeah.
writing from within the circumstance.
Yeah.
And the big thing about that book, and what I was crystal clear on when I was selling the book, was that there's no like happy ending.
Yeah.
I haven't like figured it all out. And a lot of times people tend to want to have that tidy narrative where you have figured it out and everything is okay. And so how did you find the word isn't strength, but like the sort of just the grit to decide, I am not going to give the reader what they want. I'm going to end it in a place that feels more authentic to me.
Well, I think for me, as a serious reader my whole life, sometimes I'm satisfied by an ending like that, the way I'm satisfied by like a whole sleeve of Oreos or something. Like I'm like, oh, this is so great. Like this feels so good to like sit here and like watch Love is Blind and eat this Oreo. And then it's gone and I don't really think about that experience anymore. So it's pleasure and I value it and I want more of that in my life. But the books that have stuck with me, like Hunger and so many others, like the books that really like live in me, those books invite me into a really invite me into consciousness, invite me into a struggle, invite me into a dilemma, and they don't tell me how to process it. They ask me to join like a human experience of trying to solve something. And so I guess I was hopeful that my book would have that effect, that maybe it wouldn't have this perfect ending where I said like, I've got everything figured out, although my family's still here, so I didn't blow up my life or anything, but so there's a couple things in my win column, but I don't have everything figured out. I'm still a consciousness fully searching and deeply flawed. I don't solve the 3,000-year-old philosophical question of what definitively beauty is, but I think it's valuable to sit and think about what that is, and I think it's valuable to sit and think about what it means to try to be a little bit more present in the world and how one does that. And I guess I wanted my book rather to deliver some sort of answer, but rather to invite people into just those questions with me. And I don't know. I don't know if I accomplished that, but that was my hope.
I think you did.
Oh, thanks.
And I also noticed that throughout the story, you are very close with your mother, and at times she would say, no, that's not the correct version of what actually happened.
Yeah.
Which I was really interested by, because people tend to think that memoir is really a transcription of your life when it isn't at all.
No, not at all.
And so it was interesting to see you grappling with different versions of the truth. And I was curious about how you approach truth in memoir writing.
Yeah. Well, someone had said to me, and this is sort of perceived wisdom, that like the only rule of memoir is you need to trust the author, that they're telling you the truth. And I was like, but what if nobody trusts me at all? Because that's exactly what knowing a person is like, is that they are full of self-defeating and self-aggrandizing narratives that they themselves can't parse, and that anybody who knows them or has experienced things will have different versions of the story. So I think, again, it goes back to that rejection of wanting to present what feels to me very false authoritative text, being like, here are the facts of my life and here's how everything. So in many points in the book, I'm telling a story, and then my mother will just interrupt the narrative and go like, that's not true at all. like everything you're saying, you know, and then I would record, we would have all these conversations where I'd be like, Dad told me this thing that, and then I would secretly record her, which she got really mad about. You're not supposed to do that. Maybe, I think you can lie and not tell the truth, but maybe don't secretly record. You can do it to your mom. You can, you know, moms, that's what, but she would get mad. But yeah, she just constantly is interrupting my own sort of narrativizing and self-mythologizing. And there's a really important myth that she breaks at the very end of the book that in some ways was sort of a defining story I'd been telling myself about myself my whole life. But I think that structural choice was really important because I think that is sort of a literal version or more literal version of what growth actually is. Like growth and expanding consciousness is interrogating the narratives about yourself that you've been telling to yourself, that you've believed about yourself for many, 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 many years. And if you're lucky, you have a wonderful parent that does that, or a wonderful partner, or a best friend, or a therapist, or a good editor or something. And they help you reframe truths, and you change, right? That's how change actually occurs, I think, or it's one way. So I wanted to put that in the structure of the book because that felt like, again, coming closer to the truth of what struggle and change really feels like, sort of breaking those narratives, yeah.
Sort of stepping away from the book a little bit, I wanted to talk a bit about profiles because I find that writing profiles is really difficult. I actually really hate doing them. I hate doing them so much.
You're so good at them, though.
Oh, well, go on. I never feel that way because I'm always just like, I don't want to probe or ask people personal questions unless I know them, and then I want to know like absolutely everything about you. And you're often talking to people who have been written about in hundreds of different ways. They have never been asked an original question, or at least not in the past, 10, 15, 20 years. And I was intrigued by your recent profile of Patti Smith in Harper's because it was a really wonderful read. And there were so many moments that felt like just overhearing a conversation between friends, and other moments felt like seeing this really well-known person through the eyes of someone with really fine powers of observation. And so I'm curious about how you've honed these skills in your writing, because they also came up in the memoir of developing a rapport with people to disarm them and get to more authentic conversation, and also being observational, and then of course being able to retain those observations and distill them into interesting prose.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, that Patti Smith experience, that was like the wildest experience of my life. I just got a call. You guys know who Patti Smith is? She's amazing. Yeah, I just got a call from Harper's Bazaar one day, and they were like, I'd never worked with them, and they were like, okay, so we want to give you this, and I was like, no, I can't do it. I have too many things on my plate. I can't possibly, And they were like, well, you'd have to get on a plane to Paris tomorrow. And I was like, okay. And they were like, and you have to write about Patti Smith. And I was like, okay, all right, let's go. And I think like in that case, writing about Patti Smith, I just wrote about this playwright for the New York Times Magazine, Will Arbery. And then my Pulitzer piece is a profile of the man who, his name is Ramsey Orta, who filmed, he was best friends with Eric Garner, and the video that most people have seen of Eric Garner being killed by police, by NYPD in Staten Island, he filmed that video. So the voice that you hear as Eric Garner saying, I can't breathe, that's Ramsey Orta responding to watching his best friend die. So in each one of those circumstances, I was unbelievably lucky to have lots and lots of time with them. So I'm from the Midwest, so it's deeply culturally worked into me to like mind my own business, which is not the best tool for a journalist or a memoirist. And so the way that the only way I can kind of overcome that like mind your own business is to just spend loads of time with people. So with Ramsey, he was incarcerated, and I went and saw him every weekend for a year. And that piece took a full year to write. With Will, I got to spend 4 months with him. And then with Patti Smith, I was supposed to go to Paris for 1 day and ended up staying for 10 days and spending 18 hours a day with her for 10 days. So in all of those cases, it felt like I could just kind of immerse myself in their being and really think about them, again, as like whole people. Of course, I also really do my homework and I read all the questions, so I know all the questions they've been asked for 20 years. But then I think the thing that combines the way you write about people maybe in memoir or nonfiction, the way you write about them in journalism, is there's no way that you're ever going to tell the whole entirety of a person. So craft is about making decisions, right? So for me, it was, even writing a whole book, you're not getting the story of my whole life. You're not getting all of me for sure. You're actually only getting 18 months of my life. You're not getting the entirety of my mother as a person or the entirety of Patti Smith in a 4,000 word profile. So you just make a choice, and then everything serves that choice or that question or that thesis. So for my book, my parents represented in my book this sort of struggle between idealism and practicality. So all the details that you're going to get about my parents are about that tension between them and how that tension operates in me. I'm not going to give you the entirety of them, but I am going to give you what serves the thesis of the book. And with the Patti piece, I thought, gosh, people have been writing about her since 1976, so what can I possibly say that hasn't been said about her? And I thought, I can just be with her, and I can just describe how she's feeling right in this moment, right before her 76th birthday in Paris, doing this incredible exhibit at Centre Pompidou, and it happened to be that she was having massive writer's block. And so that's what mostly the whole piece is about, is just what does Patti Smith do when she can't work, when her whole identity is about working and being a productive artist, and what happens when she can't do that. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, does that resonate with you, with like just really trying to hone in on a question or a thesis and serving
It does. I always find myself in those moments, and I mean, time is indeed the gift, and I have not yet
You
been
don't always
given
get
that
it. Yeah,
gift.
you definitely don't always get it.
I remember when I interviewed Madonna, who was great. She showed up 90 minutes late, and my favorite part is that she didn't acknowledge that she was late. She just came in and offered me some wine, and she said, you can have anything you want, but not summer water, which was rosé. And I was like, oh, okay. And we talked for like 2 or 3 hours, and that was that.
Yeah.
And it was done. And with a lot of people, you don't have that time. So whatever time I have, I just try to figure out like that one thing that I can latch on to, and then I sort of go from there. And if that one thing doesn't happen, then I just I remember I had to interview Charlie Hunnam once, and I just wrote about his body.
Well, okay, fair.
Because, I mean,
Yeah.
easy beauty.
Yes. I have to say, I did, one of my favorite profiles I ever wrote, I wrote about tennis for GQ, and there's this tennis player who was up and coming, he's been injured for a long time, but it's Dominic Thiem was his name. Anybody, you don't even know this guy, nobody cares about Dominic. You love Dominic Thiem? You do? Yes. You're the one.
See?
Yeah. There's 10 in the world, one with us tonight. It's amazing. Well, I love him too. He's the most boring human I'd ever met in my whole life. Incredible player, but just gave me like one-word answers. Like, I'd be like, talk to me about your footwork or something, and he'd be like, I am fast. I move well because I'm very fast. He just gave me these horrible answers. So then I thought, or not horrible, but he just wasn't going to talk to me. And he was so bad impressed that when we would go to the press conferences after a match, nobody would be there. And so the camera person would just have to ask him questions because no journalists would even come near this guy. And I thought, well, that's then the story, right? The story is, why is it that we need our athletes to have these grand narratives and to be, these big comeback stories or these big, hero versus villain stories, and why is it that a boring but incredibly talented athlete is not as compelling to us? And I loved that profile, just the sort of the problem solving of it. Yeah.
And that is a problem. Like, how do you solve a problem like a bad interview?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you do. But I'm glad that you brought up tennis, because I enjoyed reading the GQ pieces, as I was getting ready for today. Because I love tennis. My mom loves tennis. I get it from her. And like the piece about Del Potro, who is one of my favorite players. And I miss him. And you also write about Idris Elba, Peter Dinklage. You wrote about a documentary about hardline Israeli settlers, and of course Magic Mike, which,
Yes.
I mean, how could you not? And so I'm just curious about your curiosity and how you decide what to write about. I know a lot of it, people always expect a glamorous answer, and a lot of it's that you're writing to assignment. But how has your intellectual curiosity evolved over the course of your career thus far?
Well, that's such a great question. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Part of the answer is you get assigned things and you take on assignments. But I do think that there's, I think this is true of all of us. Like, there's usually like a sort of core experience or core question that you become really obsessed with and you kind of return to over and over and over again in really different ways. And I think that for me, one of the most like animating and urgent experiences is when I feel, and I was sort of talking about this a minute ago, like when I feel a literal perceptual shift. So what I mean by that is like when my senses extend further than they could previously. So with tennis, well, I mean, so thinking about criticism, right? It's like you read a book and you're working on a piece of criticism. You read it and you have one sort of maybe response to it, and I think diligent critics think, what could I do to extend my perception of this book, even if I don't like it or if I'm going to be critical of it? Like, what would reading it again extend that? Would reading other books by this writer do that? Would talking, reading other things? Like, we're always sort of pushing into these experiences of extending our perception. So I started writing about tennis because I went to a bar and I was watching a match and I didn't grow up with it. And I just was like, this is the most boring thing that has ever happened to me. I was like, how is this, the Dominic Thiem fan is so mad at me, but, I don't know what to tell you. I was like, it's a ball going over a net, and all these people are watching it and like getting whiplash. I was like, this is horrible. I can't understand this at all. And then this guy who was working at the bar was a huge, massive tennis fan. And he was like, no, you don't see. But what's happening is, like, this is a chess match. And, Serena's pulling her opponent out wide so that then she can do. And I was like, you're making that up. There's no chance. Like, everybody's just flinging their rackets around. And then he'd be like, oh, like, look, like, you can read his serve. And I was like, what does that mean? And I realized I was having this moment where I was watching literally the same thing this guy was watching, but he could see so profoundly, deeply into this visual event. And I thought, well, I want to do that. I want to know how to see what he's seeing. So I was like, I'll just write about it for a year for GQ, and I'll learn every single thing that I can possibly learn about it. And then, of course, by the end of the year, I was having a completely different visual experience of this thing that was so opaque to me before. And I think that same impulse ties to the reason why I could spend a year writing about Ramsey Orta, because when that video of Eric Garner came out, at that time, people were looking at it and they were saying, this isn't a murder, this is a man with health problems. This is not somebody crying out, I can't breathe, this is someone resisting. And I thought, well, gosh, we're looking at this video that seems so obvious about what we're all seeing, and we're having seemingly all these different responses to it. Like, what are the perceptual, cognitive, social, racial, economic, like, what are all those things that are making it impossible for us to see the same things? And I thought, that's a question worth spending a year of my life seeking an answer to. But I think, and then writing about art, so much of my work is art writing, and I think it's because I go into museums and over and over and over again, I go like, I don't care about that painting, I don't care about that painting, that painting's, and then I go again, and I go again, and I go again, and suddenly I'm having brand new, or I read something, or I go with a smart friend, and I'm having brand new experiences of the same piece of canvas. And to me, that's like one of the absolute greatest things about being alive. I think it's one of the things that define us as humans, that we're capable of that. I want to live forever, so I can do that for the rest of, all of time. And it's always, I think, at the heart of everything that I write. I think it connects even seemingly disparate topics. So when I get to search out my own work, when I'm not just responding to an assignment, I think that obsession is almost always at the core of it.
I read in Bomb magazine that you love to write at Hy-Vee, and I too am from the Midwest, and for all of you New Jerseyans,
They don't know what the Hy-Vee is.
Hy-Vee is an amazing grocery store, and I believe it's employee owned, and it's a chain in the Midwest.
Yep.
And writers always say interesting things about like their favorite place to write, but it's like generally like a bar or like there's this little hotel in France.
Yeah.
Which like
Which I'll
congratulations.
go if someone wants to.
Why not?
If anyone has like a chateau in France, like
Hook you
I'm
up?
available to go right there.
So what is it about the Hy-Vee and your writing process?
The Hy-Vee, you guys, do we have like big grocery stores here? Like really big ones?
Stop and Shop, I think.
Like true, like you would know, like true Midwestern style, like
I
big
have yet to
parking
see
lot.
them, but I suspect the further we get into the wilds of New Jersey, the more that those grocery stores pop up. They're there? Okay, good.
They're there. These are some of the greatest things that civilization has ever created, is the giant grocery store. I live in Brooklyn, so I'm forced into doing all this cute shopping, like popping to the bodega and just like getting some smoked salmon for our breakfast or something. And it drives me, I hate it so much. I want to go with a Suburban, which I don't have, and like get a gigantic, amount of groceries and then hunker down and put something in a crock pot. I just love these gigantic grocery stores. But also living in Brooklyn, if you go to a coffee shop or a bar to write, you're just like jostling with beautiful people all the time, and like the music is really hip, and I suddenly feel insecure if I'm like half in my pajamas or something, and it's hard to get work done in that sort of space. And a lot of the work of being a writer is extremely unglamorous work. It's emails, it's logistics, it's editing, it's looking at notes from an editor, it's turning a draft around as fast as you can, it's dealing with, any number of people who have all these different jobs that you're interfacing with as a writer. And so I sort of need like an environment, a utilitarian, good Midwestern environment that matches that mindset. And that I found is this little cafe that's cute. It's like just some tables that are in between the hot bars at the Hy-Vee. So you go in and you just can start dreaming. You can be like, what do I want to eat today? Do I want to eat like one slice of pizza, like 3 ounces of broccoli, get some shopping for later, eat like an orange, eat like a donut, get a loaf of bread that's been dyed Chiefs, colors, because we have that at the Hy-Vee. And then you can just eat all those things at these little tables, and there'll be like little old ladies having their coffee together, and there was like a Scrabble tournament that was always happening. And you look at nothing but a parking lot, and like you just work. Like that's just an environment to get work. Like nobody comes and talks to you. I don't flirt with anybody at the Hy-Vee. You can't go to a Brooklyn coffee shop without falling in love. Like I can't fall in love when I have to turn around edits by 5, So it's like you can't fall in love in the Hy-Vee, and you can go in your pajamas. It's just a glorious experience. But I wanted to ask you, like, because you travel so much. I'm allowed to ask you questions, right?
You are.
Okay.
You are. It is a free-for-all.
You travel so much. You have to work in so many different environments. I imagine you're working on planes and in, waiting rooms in various different places and green rooms. And so I mean, do you find that like different types of work, you need a sort of different mental environment, or have you just sort of lost all ability to pick and choose because you're so busy and doing so much?
That's a good question. I have largely lost the ability to be precious about where I write, because like ideally I want to write in my house on my couch watching like Law and Order or HGTV.
Yeah.
And
That's in the
zone.
acknowledgments of,
Yeah.
of that.
And people always think I'm kidding, and I'm like, I am dead serious.
Yeah.
That's how the magic happens. But like tomorrow we're going home to LA, and the flight is 6 hours and 16 minutes. And so that's actually a nice little writing retreat for me now, because my wife and I share custody of the dog, passing him across the aisle so we can each like concentrate for 2.5 hours or whatever. And so I have taught myself to write in hotels, waiting rooms, and yes, green rooms, because sometimes an event is like, we need you 2 hours early.
Yeah.
And then they're like, let's do a sound check. And I'm like, anybody could talk into that microphone. I don't have to do that, but okay. And then I have like this 2 hours, and in general, people are afraid to talk to you in a green room, which you don't have to be, but like, thank you, because then I get a lot of stuff done. So I can write almost anywhere now, but I don't know that it's good writing. Words just end up on the page.
Yeah.
We kind of go from there. I have this question that I love to ask all creative people, and that is, what do you like most about your writing and how you do it?
Oh, that's such a good question. Gosh, I don't know. I think that like maybe everybody who's a writer has like a certain aspect of the craft that they've sort of identified with really early, or sort of fell in love with really early. Like some people are really brilliant at plot, and that comes to them very seamlessly and naturally. Some people are really obsessed with, character or setting. And I think for me, the thing that I try to be good at all those. I mean, of course, the work of being a writer is trying to get all those things down. But I think the thing that I really fall in love with the most is sounds within language. So wanting my reader, really trying to think very seriously about the oral experience of language, or the sound that will happen in your mind as you're reading my work. So there are a lot of sentences that I really labored over to try to just get them to sound interesting, or to sound the way I wanted them. So like one of my favorite sentences in this book, I was just talking to my husband, my husband was just making fun of me about this, but one of my favorite sentences in the book is I wanted to communicate in a sentence the sort of romanticism of those like Tuesday night boring meals that you make with your family, like the emergency meals. And so the sentence, I'm talking about what we're gonna make for dinner on a random Tuesday night, and I just say, the sentence is frozen gyozas again. Because one, that's what we do, that's real, that's our Tuesday night, if Trader Joe's frozen gyozas or something. But also I love that sentence. I'm obsessed with that sentence. And so I thought, and it makes, just those sounds, frozen, gyoza, again, the repetition of the G's and the Z's, but also it fits the moment, because the moment is about trying to find beauty in the everyday. So I need to write with the same reverence for these Tuesday night meals that I do at the beginning of the book for Bernini's. So language that's not just pretty for the sake of it, but for enforcing or reinforcing the point. So that's something I really I work hard on, yeah.
I love that that's your favorite sentence, or one of your favorite sentences, because I still remember seeing that sentence, and I love when Z's happen and sort of adjacent to each other, so great. Yay.
Yeah. Or there's one other, this is sort of a secret, I haven't really said this before, I don't think, but so this thing called the neutral room, which is like the space that I go into in my mind where I sort of retreat and I count to 8, and it's a way of dissociating. So when I go into the neutral room and I count 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I first really explain the neutral room in the first chapter of the book, in the following paragraph, every sentence has 8 syllables. And, is anybody going to notice that? No, but I know that if you're reading that paragraph, you're doing your own 8 count. So for a moment, and again, we're talking about embodied, deep embodied writing. For a moment, I'm asking you to go into your own sort of neutral room and do that 8 count with me. So burying those things in the sentence, like sentence level, like it's not that I think that people are going to consciously or explicitly pick up on them, but just like listening to a really well-produced, song or something, layers and textures appear to the mind not always purely consciously, but subconsciously, and I think we can always feel it when an author's being as generous or as intentional on every level of language as possible. And that's just something I admire so much in other writers, and I try to do in my own writing.
I love the layers there and the subtleties that can come out, and like pairing the 8 count of the neutral room and the 8 count of the syllables. And it's just intriguing. Like every writer I speak to just has something interesting about them. And
What's
I
your
have not
answer?
yet found that one tennis player.
Okay. Wait,
That's
what's
it.
your answer? Have you answered this question? Don't we want to know?
Traitors. I actually enjoy my writing, and because I love doing it. Still enjoy writing. I'm not a tortured writer. I've been tortured lately because I'm just struggling with block, but I still enjoy it. I still enjoy like the idea that I get to just talk about my own thoughts and ideas, and also criticize others and make up things. And I just get to do so many different things, and I'm interested in so many different things. So I think what I love most about my writing is my ability to work across genres and always try new things, whether it works or not, and just embrace genre for what it is and try to learn new things. I just like that I can do that, like a Swiss Army knife. You never know.
Wolf, my son always wants to ask a question.
Oh yes, Wolfgang. Oh my God, look at the way he just handed that to you. So he asked, how did the neutral room come into being?
So great question, Wolfgang. So the neutral room was something I was taught by a doctor, my orthopedic surgeon, when I was really young, when I was like 6 or 7. So my disability comes with a chronic pain disorder, and one of the things I was experiencing, and this is one of the amazing things about the human mind, is that anticipatory pain can become real pain in the body. So my doctor was saying to me, a way of sort of short-circuiting anticipatory pain was, if I was in a situation where I needed to walk a long distance, and I still do this because I live in Brooklyn and I'm walking all the time, instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be walking for so long, and then I have to get on the subway, then I have to, he would say, just go into this separated space in your mind, which he called the neutral room, and visualize it the same way, and visualize the numbers 1 through 8 flashing on a wall, and you just count to 8, and he'd say, you're not in pain for the whole day, you're only in pain for 8 seconds, and you can handle that. And I found out later that like distance athletes do a version of this. So like marathon runners will talk about, like they don't go, oh God, I'm running for 26 miles. Like nobody would do that, it's so dumb. But what they say to themselves is like, I'm only running to that bench. I'm only passing this one runner, and then they start over. And I found that the neutral room was this incredible way of dealing with pain management, but it also became a way of breaking down a lot of other difficult tasks. So when I was doing my PhD, I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in school forever. I would just be like, I'm only reading this passage. I'm only finishing this section of this paper. And that's it. And then it restarts, and you have a new 8 count, so to speak. One of the complexities or struggles of the book, rather, is just that coping mechanism can also be a tool for escaping responsibility, not being present, absenting yourself from moments in which social pain arises, and how those things could make me complicit. So the neutral room, complicit in things I didn't want to be complicit in. So the neutral room is a space where on one side of the threshold, it's an incredible tool of agency, and on the other side of the threshold, it can be a way of absenting myself from my very real life and the responsibilities of my life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chloé Cooper Jones, and her memoir is Easy Beauty, and a bookseller is out front selling paperback copies of the book, which the launch is today. Well, not the launch,
this is
but
the first time it's
this is
come
the
out,
first
yeah.
paperback event, which drops today.
Yay.
And thank you so much, Chloé Cooper Jones, for joining us here. Thank you to the AV team. And of course, thank you to Nishi Shah, who coordinates all of my events and is truly invaluable in so many ways. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and enjoy the weather.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Thank you.